The house was unusually quiet that evening.
Dinner had ended, but no one stood up from the table. Plates sat half-cleared, glasses untouched. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like something is about to break it. She sat at the end of the table, her hands folded neatly in front of her. Her posture was calm, but inside, her heart was not. She had learned long ago how to keep her feelings hidden. Years of practice had taught her that silence was safer than arguing, across from her sut. Her stepson, he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, confidence written clearly on his face. He was young, but not a child anymore. Old enough to speak his mind. Old enough to hurt without fully understanding the weight of his words. He let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "You really expect me to believe those stories?" He said. She looked up at him slowly. "What stories?" she asked, even though she knew exactly what he meant. "All of them," he replied. "The struggles, the sacrifices, the things you say you went through?" He paused, then said the words that would hang in the air for the rest of the night. "You're lying. None of it is real." The room went still. Another family member shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. No one defended her. No one challenged him. It was easier to stay quiet than step into the tension. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She didn't even look surprised. Instead, she studied his face, the certainty in his eyes, the way he believed he already knew the truth. For years, she had told small stories from her past. Never dramatic, never loud. Just pieces of her life, shared during quiet moments. She never demanded belief. She never asked for praise, but she had hoped, at least, for trust. Her stepson had never believed her. To him, she was just someone who talked too much about things that never happened. Someone who liked attention. Someone who made herself look important by telling stories that sounded too perfect or too sad. He had made jokes before. Little comments, smirks, she had ignored them all. Tonight, he said it out loud. "You always say these things like they're facts," he continued. "But there's no proof. No evidence. Just words." She felt something tighten in her chest. Not anger. Not fear, disappointment. She had known this moment would come one day. She just didn't expect it to hurt this much. "You don't have to believe me," she said softly. He scoffed. "That's convenient." She took a slow breath. The kind you take when you are trying to stay steady for a brief second. Her eyes drifted toward the hallway leading to the back room. A room she rarely entered. A room that held things she preferred to leave untouched. The stepson noticed her glance. "What?" he said. "Going to make up another story?" That was when she stood up. The sound of her chair scraping against the floor echoed louder than it should have. Everyone looked at her now. "I never wanted you to know this way," she said quietly. Her voice wasn't shaky. It wasn't defensive. It was tired. She walked away from the table without another word. The stepson watched her go, confused but still confident. He leaned forward, whispering to himself, "Here we go." She stopped in front of the old cabinet in the back room. Her hand hovered in the air before opening it. Inside were a few forgotten items, things wrapped in cloth. Things packed away not because they were useless, but because they carried weight. She reached for a thin folder. Her fingers trembled slightly. As she pulled it out, back at the table, the stepson drummed his fingers impatiently. He expected excuses, another speech, another story, but when she returned, she wasn't empty-handed. She held something old, folded, fragile. She placed it gently on the table. Between them, it made a soft sound as it touched the wood. He looked down at it, then back up at her. "What's that?" he asked. She met his eyes for the first time that night. "Something I hoped you'd never need to see," she said. The room fell silent again, and for the first time, the stepson felt a flicker of doubt. Asterisk of the paper lay on the table. Untouched. The stepson didn't pick it up right away. Instead, he leaned back again, trying to hold on to his confidence. He told himself this was just another attempt to sound serious. Another trick. Another story wrapped in silence. She sat back down slowly, her hands resting on her lap. She didn't push the paper toward him. She didn't explain it. She waited. Waiting had always been her strength before she ever joined this family. She had learned that patience could protect a person. It could also hurt them, quietly, over time. She came into their lives years ago, careful and reserved. She wasn't there to replace anyone. She made that clear from the beginning. She cooked meals, listened more than she spoke, and tried not to take up too much space. At first, the stepson barely noticed her. When he did, it was usually when she shared small stories, things that came up naturally. A difficult job she once had? A time she had to make a hard decision. Moments when she had been scared but kept going anyway. She never told them dramatically. There were no raised voices or long speeches. Just calm sentences shared during everyday moments, but the stepson always reacted the same way, a raised eyebrow, a quiet laugh, a look that said, "That sounds made up." He had grown up learning that truth had to be proven, that if something really happened, there would be photos, records, or someone else to confirm it. Words alone were not enough. He had also heard comments from others. "She likes to exaggerate," someone once said within his earshot. "She's probably just talking," another voice had added. Those words settled in his mind and stayed there. So every time she spoke about her past, he filed it away under fiction. Something interesting to listen to, maybe, but not something to believe. She noticed. Of course, she noticed how he stopped asking questions, how he stopped listening altogether, how his eyes would drift away the moment she began to speak. Still, she never confronted him. She told herself it didn't matter, that the past was the past, that she didn't need anyone's approval to know what she had lived through. But deep down, it mattered more than she wanted to admit. Back in the present, the stepson cleared his throat. "So?" he said, gesturing toward the paper. "What's the point?" She looked at him for a long moment. "The point," she said, "is not to win an argument." He frowned, confused. She continued, "I never told my stories so you'd believe me blindly. I told them because they shaped who I am." He didn't respond. She could see the struggle in his face. Part of him wanted to dismiss the moment and move on. Another part was starting to wonder why she looked so certain, so calm. She leaned forward slightly. "You've always thought I wanted attention," she said. "But attention fades. Truth doesn't." Her words landed softly, but they carried weight. The stepson glanced at the paper again. It didn't look impressive. It wasn't shiny or dramatic. Just old, worn, real. He suddenly remembered all the times she had helped him without saying a word. The nights she stayed up when he was sick. The rides she gave without complaining. The advice she offered only when asked. None of that fit the image he had created of her. Still, doubt held him back. "Anyone can print something," he muttered. She nodded slowly. "You're right." That surprised him. "But not everyone keeps it hidden for years," she added. The room felt smaller now. The silence tighter. She pushed the paper toward him, just a little. "You don't have to read it," she said. "But if you do, read it carefully." He hesitated. His fingers hovered over the paper, uncertainty creeping in where confidence used to be. Finally, he picked it up. And as he unfolded the old clipping, the mood in the room began to change. The paper felt different in his hands. It wasn't smooth like something printed yesterday. It was thin, fragile, and slightly rough at the edges. The color wasn't white anymore, but a faded yellow, like it had been touched by time itself. The stepson unfolded it carefully. At first, he didn't read the words. He just stared at the page. The print was old, the font unfamiliar, the ink slightly faded but still clear enough to read. "This is just a newspaper," he said, trying to sound unimpressed. She didn't respond. He scanned the top of the page and stopped. There was a date printed clearly at the corner. A date from many years ago, long before she became part of his life. Long before he could even remember. His eyes moved slowly down the page. The article wasn't long. It didn't need to be. It described an incident, local, serious, and real. Names were mentioned. A place. A moment in time that had clearly mattered to someone. Then he saw her name. Not just her first name. Her full name. He blinked and read it again, convinced he had made a mistake. She watched him closely, but said nothing. This was his moment. She wouldn't interrupt it. His jaw tightened. "This could be someone else," he said quietly. She nodded. "That's what I told myself too when I first saw it." That made him look up. "You didn't write this?" he asked it. She gave a small, sad smile. "I didn't have to." He went back to the paper. The story described her role in the situation. Not exaggerated. Not emotional. Just facts. Calm and direct. It mentioned what she had done. What she had faced. What she had risked. Nothing heroic. Nothing dramatic. Just the truth. The room felt heavy now. He noticed details he hadn't expected. Specific times, witnesses, places that could be checked. This wasn't a story told for attention. This was something recorded and forgotten by everyone except the person who lived it. His fingers tightened around the paper. "Why keep this?" he asked, his voice lower now. She took a slow breath. "Because it reminded me that what I lived through was real," she said. "Even when others doubted me." He swallowed. The confidence he had carried earlier was gone, replaced by something unfamiliar, uncertainty. He read the final lines of the clipping. They described the outcome. Not a happy ending? Not a victory. Just survival. His eyes lifted from the page slowly. Her face hadn't changed. No satisfaction. No pride. Just quiet strength. His face, however, had the color drained from it as realization began to sink in. You were telling the truth," he said. Almost to himself. She didn't say "I told you so." She simply nodded once. The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't tense anymore. It was heavy with understanding. He looked down at the clipping again, then back at her. "Is there more?" he asked. Her eyes held his. "Yes," she said. "But that's only part of the story." And in that moment, he knew that everything he thought he understood was about to change. The stepson kept holding the clipping. But he wasn't really looking at it anymore. His eyes were on her now. "If this is real," he said slowly, "why didn't you ever talk about it like this?" She didn't answer right away. She leaned back in her chair, as if the weight of the memory had finally caught up to her. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but softer than before, because the truth doesn't always sound the way people expect it to. She said. She began to explain what the clipping could not. At the time, she had been younger. Life wasn't stable. She was trying to hold things together with very little support. The situation mentioned in the paper had come suddenly, forcing her to make choices no one should have to make alone. She spoke about fear, not as something dramatic, but as something quiet. The kind of fear that stays with you even when everything looks normal from the outside. "There were days I didn't know how I would get through the next morning," she said. "But I did." The clipping only showed the moment people could see. It didn't show the nights she stayed awake, the times she questioned herself, the sacrifices she made that never appeared in print. The stepson listened without interrupting. For the first time, he wasn't waiting for holes in the story. He wasn't preparing to doubt her. He was simply listening. She told him why she never showed anyone the clipping. Not her friends. Not her family. "I didn't want my life reduced to one piece of paper," she said. "I wanted to move forward, not be defined by it." He looked down at the table, shame slowly creeping in. "All this time," he said, "I thought you were just making things sound bigger than they were." She shook her head gently. "I made them smaller," she replied, "so they wouldn't scare anyone. So they wouldn't scare me." That sentence stayed with him. He remembered every time he had laughed, every time he rolled his eyes, every careless word. "You let me think you were lying," he said. "I let you think what you needed to," she answered. "Belief forced by proof isn't real belief." Her words didn't accuse him. They invited him to understand. The stepson felt his throat tighten. The clipping suddenly felt heavier in his hands, like it carried not just ink and paper, but years of silence. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I know," she replied. The room felt different now. Warmer, but heavier too. Like something fragile had been cracked open. He folded the clipping carefully, afraid of damaging it. "So this is why you never defended yourself," he said. She nodded. "Some truths don't need defending. They just need time." He looked at her again, really looked at her. Not as someone telling stories, but as someone who had lived them, and in that moment, something inside him shifted, but understanding he would soon learn came with a cost. The stepson sat very still. The room felt quieter than it had all evening, as if even the walls were listening. The confidence he had walked in with was completely gone. In its place was something heavier, regret. He turned the folded clipping over in his hands. Again and again, I didn't just doubt you, he said finally. I judged you. She didn't respond right away, not because she was angry, but because she wanted him to sit with his own words. Some lessons needed silence to sink in. I thought you wanted attention, he continued, his voice unsteady now. I thought you were trying to make yourself seem important. She met his eyes. I was just trying to make sense of my life, she said calmly. Stories help people do that. He swallowed hard. Memories rushed back to him, times when she had spoken and he hadn't listened. Moments when he laughed instead of asking questions. Times when she went quiet and he felt proud of himself for seeing through her. Those moments didn't feel smart anymore. They felt cruel. I'm sorry, he said. Thought the words weren't loud. They weren't dramatic, but they were real. She nodded once, acknowledging them. I'm not upset that you questioned me, she said. Questioning is natural. It's how you did it that hurt. That truth landed harder than any accusation. He lowered his head. I didn't give you a chance, he admitted. I decided who you were without really knowing you. She leaned back slightly, her shoulders relaxing for the first time that night. I didn't need you to defend me, she said. I just needed you to listen. Tears burned at the back of his eyes, but he blinked them away. This wasn't about making a scene. It was about facing himself. He placed the folded clipping back on the table between them. I don't deserve to hold this, he said. She reached out and picked it up, her fingers steady. This isn't a reward for believing, she replied. It's just a reminder. He watched her carefully place the clipping back into the folder. What changed tonight? He asked. She paused. You did? She said. That answer stayed with him. He realized something important. Then proof hadn't changed the truth. It had only changed his willingness to accept it. The truth had always been there. He took a deep breath. I can't undo what I said, he said. But I can do better. She looked at him, searching his face, then gave a small nod. That's all anyone can do. The distance between them didn't disappear in that moment. Healing didn't happen instantly, but something real had begun. And for the first time, belief wasn't forced. It was chosen. The days that followed were quieter, not uncomfortable quiet, but thoughtful. The kind of quiet that comes after something important has been said. The stepson noticed small changes in himself first. He listened more. Not just to her, but to others as well. When she spoke, he didn't rush to judge or question. He paid attention to the tone of her voice, the pauses between her words. He realized how much meaning could live in silence. She noticed the change too. He began helping without being asked. He defended her when someone made careless comments. Once, when a friend joked about her stories, he spoke up calmly and said, You don't know what she's been through. She didn't react in that moment, but later that night, she sat alone and let herself feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. The clipping returned to its place in the cabinet. Not hidden away out of shame, but set aside with peace. It had served its purpose. It was no longer proof. It was history. Their relationship didn't turn perfect overnight. There were still awkward moments. There were still misunderstandings. But now there was respect. And respect changed everything. One evening, weeks later, the stepson sat with her in the living room. Will you tell me another story? He asked. She looked at him, surprised. Are you sure? She asked. He nodded. I want to hear it, even if I don't understand all of it. She smiled softly. This time, she didn't choose a story about struggle. She chose a simple one. A moment of joy. A small memory that had nothing to prove. And he listened. As the story ended, he didn't interrupt. He didn't question. He just sat with it. Later that night, she reflected on everything that had happened. Truth. She realized doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to convince. It doesn't beg to be believed. It simply exists. People don't always reject truth because it's false. Sometimes They reject it because accepting it means admitting they were wrong, and that can be harder than any lie. The stepson learned something that night too, that belief is not about evidence alone. It's about trust, about humility, about choosing to see people for who they are, not who we assume them to be. Some stories aren't meant to impress, they're meant to be believed. And sometimes the ones we doubt the most are the ones that matter the most.